Good afternoon from the studios at Roxo Media in Fort Worth. I'm John Henry. To my left here is Jake White, retired sergeant of the Fort Worth Police Department. In our role here on Signal 51 Chronicles, we will cover a variety of true crime incidents.
Yep.
In episode 1, episode 1 and 2, we cover the last murder of 2016 in Fort Worth. And we look at the circumstances behind these incidents, and using Jake's expertise and experience, we analyze what happened in those incidents. One of the other things we want to do is be topical as well. And that brings us to this week's tragic shooting in Uvalde, in which 19 children were killed and 2 teachers as well. It has come to the attention of news reporters that there is some question about the response of law enforcement officers to this incident. Many parents, and I think we have to preface this by saying that they're emotionally charged parents, obviously.
Sure.
For obvious reasons. But many parents were highly critical of law enforcement and what they did or did not do to stop this shooting. Before we talk about this, I think it's important to point out that as we sit here in Fort Worth, we do not know all the facts of what happened there. The police chief in Uvalde said yesterday that, or maybe the day before, that the Texas Rangers, I believe, are going to undertake a full and thorough investigation, which is quite typical in a case like this, I guess.
Yeah.
But we do want to try to answer some general questions about the response to law enforcement to incidents like this. And I want to start with asking Jake. Uvalde the population is 16,000 people, a little over 16,000 people. Your best guesstimate, how big would that police force be?
Maybe 25, 30, somewhere in that ballpark, I would think.
And how big, as a contrast, now, of course, Fort Worth is a city of probably over 1 million people, but I just saw census figures yesterday that said 935,000 plus. And Fort Worth is, the 4th Police Department is how big?
There's over 1,800 officers. Somewhere in 1,800 ballpark.
And does that include people in management and administrative roles? Does that include the chief?
That would be, yes, sworn personnel. Those that wear a badge and carry a gun.
So when we talk about Uvalde and we're guessing 25 officers, so that includes the chief and
everybody,
detectives,
yep,
and whatever else.
And 25, honestly, looking at it from a perspective of a town of 16,000, maybe a bit high. It's just kind of a number,
right,
that I'm throwing out there.
Right. So what is the police officers get a 911 call to a school shooting? First officer or officers arrive. What is the obligation of those officers in responding to that call?
So I think you have to look at it from 3 parts. There's 3 likely scenarios that they encountered. If you look at scenario number 1, the first officer arrives, can hear gunfire inside the school. There's no question you're going in, right? We call it earning your check.
Earning your paycheck.
Earning your paycheck, because there's no time to process. I mean, at that point, you have one role and one role only, and that's to make sure the gunfire stops. Any means necessary to get in the building, anything you can possibly do to get inside, You got to go, and you got to go now. There is no waiting for backup. There's no waiting for a bulletproof vest or a ballistic vest or, a different weapon system or anything like that. You go with what you got, and you get in there and you address it and hopefully put a stop to it.
And let me interject that the waiting for bulletproof vests and that those are some of the things we heard might have occurred here.
Yeah.
Again, we do not know that.
Don't know that, but I think that, in one of the articles I read that discussed that, it perplexed me in the sense that when I was on the job, I always had 2 vests in my car. One was a heavy vest. Mm-hmm. One was a just more of a small, a soft body armor that you would wear under your uniform or something like that. Always had my gear with me. Seldom did I wear it, but if I needed it, I had it. But in that scenario, though, again, like I said, regardless if I had it or didn't have it, you're going in. I mean, there is no time to process. There's not much of a time to even formulate a plan. You've got one, like I said, you have one role. You have one role only. That's to go inside and to stop it.
I heard we were discussing this earlier. A law enforcement officer who, not from Fort Worth, I don't remember where he was from, but said going in might even include ramming your car. If you can't get in the front door, you ram your car right through there and go.
Any means necessary.
Officers in the city of Fort Worth, I'm sure, were trained in incidents like this.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the bullet points of that training that you could pass along to us? What, other than obviously you neutralize a shooter immediately, what other things? Is there a psychological? Because I imagine that certainly if I was a cop, I'm a chicken, but if I hear gunfire, I'm gonna. There's this instinct of fight or flight, right? And it kicks in. Is there some sort of psychological barrier you've got to get through as a police officer to?
I think for many there are, and situations vary. Nobody wants to go in that environment, but as a cop, that's your job, right? So there is a moment that you've got to fight through that. But that's where the importance of training comes into play, mm-hmm. because you want to be able to respond without putting much thought into what your response is. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to know this is the next step I'm thinking, or this is the next step I'm taking, without thinking about what the next step is. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is an element that you have to fight through that. Some, be it different life experiences, maybe they have experience in the military, maybe they're combat veterans, something like that, to where they're exposed to it. Maybe they're a veteran police officer who has significant training. And I think the other important thing to highlight is significant experience. Oftentimes people will see a police officer, and it could be somebody who maybe appears to be in their 40s, somebody who looks like they've been on the job for a while. That doesn't mean they've done the job. Because
they haven't earned their paycheck
yet. They haven't earned their paycheck because the reality is there are positions, sadly, where one can hide. That's what we call it. You want to go somewhere and hide out. You don't want to do the work. You want to collect the check. You want to collect the pension, but you don't want to do the work. So just because the officer responds, even if the officer is a veteran officer, their response may not be representative of such experience. And again, going back to your question, we talk about the idea of what's the officer supposed to do? Well, the more often that you're involved in those high stress scenarios, your response manner or your response systems, if you will, operates quicker. Mm-hmm. Again, like I said, the whole goal is to take that next step without thinking of the next step. Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, but that applies to,
because you don't know what you're going to find in there anyway.
No,
right?
You have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea. And I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes, I mean, thank God I was never in a million years exposed to any scenario remotely close to what happened there in the school. Nothing remotely close to that. I have seen it. I have seen, one particular officer, in one particular case, 2 officers get shot. Those guys are going, the responding officers, if you will, are going in and they're not thinking about it. They know that 2 of the guys that they work with on a daily basis and have known for years are shot. They know what to do. They know what steps to take, and they're going in. But again, I'm saying that scenario, I'm applying that go at all cost, by any means necessary, if when they pull up, they hear the gunfire.
And they hear the gunfire.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't hear the gunfire.
Well, so then you have to look at it if it's a barricaded person. Or in this case,
like a hostage
situation.
Yeah.
Can the police do more harm if they recklessly run in? And I say recklessly because, again, I'm going back to the idea that there's no time for a plan. But can the police do more harm? You know, you're not talking about an environment, an open space room with 1 or 2 people. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a school with probably hundreds of kids in there, or a classroom with 25 people in there, teachers and students included. So if it is a hostage scenario, if you run in, what
right.
There's so many things
you might
can
cause
go
the
wrong.
death of 19 kids.
Right. And then you have to start thinking, okay, if I go into the classroom, what's behind? So here's suspect armed with a rifle. I'm going through the door. I want to stop the suspect with a rifle, but behind him are 7, 8, 10, 12 kids. Contrary to what a lot of people think, police have to be proficient with their firearm. There is no doubt about it. It is absolutely 100% expected. It's mandated. It's something that is trained, probably could do a better job or do more training with it, because when you're in that scenario and you have to use that firearm, you've got to be prepared to use it. So when you look at that barricaded or that hostage scenario, that response by going into the room, if the police can't make a mistake, they can't accidentally shoot someone, right? So if the responding officers pulled up and there is no gunfire,
that's an important distinction, whether they hear gunfire or not.
I think so.
Right.
I mean, and again, there's a million different scenarios.
Right.
But I think it does slow it down a little bit. Here's the reality, though. Everything may shift from that day going forward in regards to how law enforcement responds to that kind of scenario. If they treated that as a hostage or a barricaded persons, I don't know what they did. I don't know the policies in Uvalde. I don't know how the state troopers or the myriad of law enforcement agencies that were there, I don't know how they train. I don't know how they handle those scenarios. But I do think that if they treated it like a barricaded person, you're not just going to run into the environment. Again, I'm not saying that was right. I'm not saying it was wrong. I wasn't there. I have zero firsthand knowledge.
It is a possible explanation, though.
It is possible. But let's face it, who doesn't struggle with that? Because, you see the parents standing outside of the school. You've got the police here, or can assume what happened inside of the school, and the police are standing there. So that's going to create incredible frustration from the parents. Completely understand that. Like I said, perhaps things change from that day going forward, though. Maybe that's no longer the response. I don't know. I mean, because we don't know the condition. We don't know how grave it was before the first officers went in. We don't know.
Right. Were you working yet when Columbine went down?
No. Was that in 99?
99, I think.
Yeah. So no, I hired on the year after in 2000. But that shifted our training though. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask. Columbine, I think, was the first of these mass school shootings, certainly in this era. Mm-hmm. And Columbine kind of became the foundation for changing the tactics of law enforcement to these types of incidents. Is that right? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, historically, again, I wasn't on the job during Columbine, clearly pre-Columbine, but very early in my career, when we would go to our in-service training, that was one of the things that the exact scenario that happened, or not the exact, but a similar scenario that happened just 2 days ago or 3 days ago was Columbine replayed, unfortunately. Now, Columbine High School appeared to be a bigger structure, probably more kids. But the one shift was when you hear the gunfire, you go. Because if you remember some of the Columbine videos that are unfortunate, you have police officers, full uniform, standing outside of the building while shots are still going off. You've got the kids diving out of the window. So if I see a kid diving out of the window, I'm going to assume there's somebody in there still shooting. So that did change the response. And like I said, maybe this event changes the responses going forward, because it is hard to justify. It is hard to explain. I think that a lot of I think, as a cop, it would be difficult to stand outside of a school, gunshots, no gunshots, and not go in. I mean, I think that's something that some of them possibly struggled with. But, then you get into this whole concept of a paramilitary organization. You have this rank structure. I think the other thing that's very important to highlight, when you looked at when you watch the news reports, you see a myriad of law enforcement agencies, ranging from Uvalde Police to the Consolidated ISD Police Department, DPS, sheriffs, constables, Border Patrol, game wardens, unmarked cars, just with the hidden red and blue lights. There's a ton of cops there who all work for different people, who all train differently, who probably can't communicate with each other. You may have a team of DPS troopers on the corner, on the southeast corner of the building, and a team of Uvalde PD guys on the northeast corner.
And they might not even know each other, right? I mean,
I can almost guarantee you, they probably do not know each other, or there's a strong likelihood they don't know each other. There's an even stronger likelihood that they've never trained together. They probably have different tactics. They probably have different procedures. They may or may not be able to communicate. I mean, there are some ways where, area law enforcement agencies can communicate with each other just on their handheld radios. But here's the deal. When you're in those high stress scenarios, just like that, when you're trying to fumble around with your radio, your walkie-talkie, trying to figure out, how do I get to this channel? I don't even know how to get to this channel because I got to press this button. I got to turn the dial. I got to do this. Your fine motor skills can already be a little bit impacted. So I would suspect that the communication component, there was probably an issue there as well. So that, again, I don't know if that attributes to the response.
And you talked about the Consolidated School District Police, Uvalde Police. Who has jurisdiction on that? Would be the Uvalde Police, right? On site, or can we say that definitively? Do we not necessarily?
I don't know definitively. I mean,
can we say typically? Who would the Fort Police have?
I think so. I mean, it falls within
command jurisdiction. Is that, if that's such a thing on an incident like that?
Yeah, that's interesting. You brought that up because yes. So let's assume that the school was within the city limits of Uvalde. Then yes, their police department is going to have the ultimate responsibility. But, and this is just simply based on size, presumable size of their department, they don't have the resources.
Right.
So they are going to quickly defer to DPS, or I guess in this case, Border Patrol. They're going to quickly defer to that because they know, like, hey, this is beyond what we have the means, the resources to handle. We're not equipped to deal with it. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality. I mean, that's a small town. That's why you see that. That's why there was so many different law enforcement agencies who were there.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of the incident of Charles Whitman in Austin, the tower shooter, who went up in the tower on UT Austin and started firing on this with this high powered rifle. And the city of Austin had no idea how to handle that situation.
Yeah. That's how things evolve. I mean,
right.
They evolve with the utmost tragedy. I mean, and, again, and that's why, I don't want to jump to any conclusions that it was good, bad, that, could things have been done differently? Well, everything can be done differently.
Right. We could be doing this better,
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, unfortunately, when you're police, it's more high profile, and your mistakes are magnified quite a bit more.
Right, and that's why I think it's important, to not assume that they, one of the other things that was floated was the idea of the door being barricaded.
The classroom door.
The classroom door being barricaded.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. Because what if the police do hear shots, go into the school, and they get to the classroom, and then they don't hear shot, or what? And it's barricaded. What happens there?
I mean, a barricaded door is a challenge. If you are a grown man or maybe 3 grown men, and that door is barricaded in a manner that you can't defeat it, what can you do? Now, when you start looking at the responding tactical units that arrive, they definitely have tools, and I won't get too far off, but they definitely have resources to get through any barricaded door. That they've probably got in their backpack or their bag that, that I don't want to get too far off, but they have ways to get into that door. Your responding patrol officer, if you come up to a locked door, your options are one of 2 things: kick it or try to shoulder it open. I mean, now I say that in Fort Worth, I was able to work at a department that we were well equipped.
Right.
I mean, we have phenomenal, in my opinion, as an employee there, we had phenomenal funding. We had phenomenal resources. Most importantly, we had phenomenal support, which I think is the cause of all of the phenomenal equipment that we had. So in Fort Worth, it is not uncommon, or was not uncommon, for just a regular patrol vehicle to have breaching tools like a ram, ballistic shields.
Right.
Every officer had heavy vests. Every officer has the ballistic helmets.
Well, to the chagrin of critics who, and I don't want to get into this, but who say that the big city urban departments are too militarized and whatever else. But now we can see why you might need some of a battering ram or whatever to get into.
Yeah, they serve their purpose. There's no doubt about it. I mean, who are you to call, right? And unfortunately, what did we see? I mean, again, just operating under the assumption that the door was barricaded. I know where I worked, if the door was barricaded, our ability to get in there quicker, it is definitely something that's on the table because of the equipment that we have. That may not be the same in a small town. It probably is not the same in the small town. I mean, I believe they had the Border Patrol tactical unit was the one who ultimately made entry into the school. I mean, that's not an environment I'm used to policing in.
Right.
I'm used to literally being able to get on a radio and call for an entire SWAT team who's going to be there pretty quick.
Training, if you know, you might not know. What kind of differences would you see in training in a big city department like Fort Worth versus one in Uvalde? Is it the same? Is it?
No, I mean, there's obviously training standards. TCOL governs the standards of how all peace officers are trained in the state of Texas.
Tell me what TCOL is.
It's the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Education.
Okay, and so they oversee policing standards, education standards. Is that what?
Yeah. And
are they a state agency or?
Yeah, it's a state agency, right. And I suppose they set the guidelines for the minimum requirements. The advantage in the big city, you have your own police academy, and no joke, we probably have the nicest one in the entire United States.
Sure do now, don't we? You're talking about the bowling complex down there on Hemp Hill.
I've never been to one nicer. I've never heard of one that's nicer. When you have that at your disposal,
and it's brand new too.
And it's brand new.
Okay, go ahead.
Massive in size, tools, just everything. When you have that at your disposal, you're able to offer more. You're able to run through those types of very tragic scenarios that says, hey, in Fort Worth, police officers in Fort Worth, this is how you're going to respond in XYZ scenario. And a school shooter, unfortunately, are scenarios that we've had to go through. One thing I will tell you, at the police academy in Fort Worth, they have the village, the tactical village. It's a gigantic training room. I don't know how many square feet. It is huge.
That's not the same one the fire department works on, is it?
No.
But similar to that type of thing, right?
Similar.
The fire department, you see, has that building out there that they simulate.
Yeah, in this one, that you've got
fire emergencies.
You've got a mock bank, you've got a mock gas station, and you have a mock school, hallway of a school. It can be filled with smoke. It can have all these noises and lights, and the list goes on of all the things they can do. But again, that you're trying to make that you're trying to create that realistic environment. Because going back to what I said, the cops have to, when they've got to earn their paycheck, they got to go.
Yeah.
There's no time to think about it. There's no manual to pull up on your there's no iPhone app to pull up and say, okay, so I hear gunfire in the school. What do I do
Right.
now? It's time to go.
Right.
And like I said, you've got to know what your next step is without thinking about what your next step is.
Yeah. Well, to the families and the citizens of Uvalde, we offer our best wishes and our prayers to you, and hopefully the conversation we just had answered some of the questions you might have had, and we thank you for watching. I'm John Henry. That's Jake White. And we are the Signal 51 Chronicles. Thanks.